welcome one and all. It's time for another red hot, spicy, sizzling, delicious, moist tournament report. Nottingham GT. So, Stormcast in maybe their most difficult challenge yet. Many of the tournaments I've been to so far have either been fairly small or more on the casual side. But this being a GT, then obviously lots of the top players are going to be in attendance. So we'll see whether I actually get paired up against any of them and whether I can crush them or whether their lists are just too darn filthy to handle. We'll find out any minute. So, there were, I believe, 42 players at this event. It took place at the same venue as a very, very large 40k tournament, which took up at least 4 or 5 times the space that the Sigmar event did. So it was in the same large hall though, but 40k vastly more popular it seems. So, let's get rid of the episode thumbnail here. And the giant arrow. So, there's the first game. And lingering on this shot for a minute, I'll go through my list, which I have on this paper here. So, what we are is Stormcast, obviously. Scions of the Storm, obviously, so they can drop in out of the Celestial Realm. Sticking with Astral Templars. May mix that up at the next event and not use Astral Templars, but we'll see. So, for anyone unfamiliar, the reason for that subfaction is to stop monstrous rampages being used against your units. So, the reason I find that handy is because one of the keys to my list is the 2 Annihilator units there. And when they drop down, they would like to target something big and expensive because they're likely to die once they fight. So, if they can target a big monster, that's very, very viable as a target in my eyes. So, when I actually get there, I would rather not get stepped on or be roared and not be able to use all-out attack and all that fun stuff. So it just makes the Annihilators more reliable at killing the big monsters, which is what this list is designed to do. So, it is also, let's see, so I've got 2 Holy Commands because of the Warlord battalion that I've taken. That unlocks an extra one. And I've taken Call for Aid to bring back a unit of Liberators when they die, as long as I've got a command point, and it has to be within 12 of one of my heroes. And Thunderbolt Volley, which is going to allow one of my units, my shooter units, to shoot once per game in the hero phase. So, if I've got some nice expensive shooting units, just get an extra shot out of them. Also, in a phase where the enemy can't boost their armor save with all-out defense. So, very nice. Then, we've got the Take What's Theirs grand strategy. I think I've used that in every single event so far because it's just obvious for a teleporting army that wants to get in your face. I want to get my models into your territory, and I've got the Lord Relictor as well who can teleport my stuff over there at the end. And I'm not going to get my Triumph at all because I'm exactly 2,000 points. So, here is the list, and I'll show you what's on and off the table. So, we start with the Lord Imperatant, who is, I think he's hiding behind that rock over there. So he's got the Arcane Tome and Starfall, which is the spell that stops enemy units piling in, potentially. Because, as you can see, it's quite an elite army I've got here, no big units. So I want to strike at something, and then if there's any of them left, I would rather they didn't pile in. So we'll see if that spell comes up. It did find a good use at the last tournament I went to, against Nurgle. Did quite well there with that. I don't think it actually helped too much in terms of the game, but in that specific combat it did help. Then we've got the Lord Relictor, who is the general. He's hiding there as well. You'll see why I'm hiding when I get to my opponent's list in a moment. So the Relictor is the general. He's got the Translocation Prayer and he's a High Priest, so he's teleporting units on a rerollable 2+, which is always a delight. Then we've got the Knight Incantor, who is hiding behind that rock. And she has the spell Lightning Blast, which is the one that doesn't have a range, there just needs to be a visible enemy unit. So you might think, why is she hiding behind a rock when she's got infinite range? Well, she wants to be close enough to use her once per game auto unbind, so she has to be within 30 of the caster, so that's why she's so far forward. And also, it's good to spread out your army a little bit. I don't just want everything in the corner. I want to cover some ground. So, you'll see that some critical units are within range of the Relictor though. So the Lord Imperatant, he can be teleported away, and he's a decent fighter, and these Liberators here are also in range to be teleported, because they are a nice battle line, expert conquerors unit that can be teleported maybe onto an objective later on. Which is a reason that maybe they would be in the heavens to come down later, but when you see what I'm up against, you see all the guns already before I've even gone through the list. Probably understand why I want to keep some of my shooting up in the sky until it's about to shoot. My battle line units, I've got 5 Judicators, which are right there, off the table, and then we've got 2 units of 5 Liberators. So, they're all Expert Conquerors Battalion. Then, in the Bounty Hunters Battalion, we've got a Chariot, and the 2 Annihilator units there. And we also have 2 Long Strike units. So that's the whole army. And the way I would like it to work is set up in such a way so that my opponent, who's usually going to get the choice of going first or second, doesn't really have an easy selection. Whether my opponent picks first or second, I want to be able to accomplish something. So, if my opponent chooses to go first against me, then a lot of my stuff isn't going to be on the table. So there's not going to be that much stuff they can kill immediately. None of my important stuff, and things that are on the table can be hiding with the Relictor, because they can teleport, for instance. So if they go first, they'll be able to jump on objectives and such, but they won't have that many targets in my army. If they let me go first, then if I've got anything in the sky, I could immediately drop it down and shoot. And in some games, I'll keep 1 unit of long strikes on the table at the start when there's no threat from enemy shooting, which means that if I go first, they can also use Thunderbolt Volley in the first turn. So the first turn I get, whether it's first or second, I want to be able to kill a big monster. And I'm aiming to get the double turn, either probably turn 2 to 3 is the crucial time. Because turns 2 and 3, depending how the opponent sets up, but those will quite often be times that Annihilators are coming in. Because in turn 1, sometimes you're going to come up against something like this that's just a really castle-y block, and it's not necessarily the best move to bring in Annihilators to run into the front lines when all the juicy stuff is behind. But once they start moving, if the particular battle plan incentivizes that, then that's when they want to come down. So if Annihilators, for example, on turn 2 come down and kill something, and then I get the double going into turn 3, they'll be able to then charge something else, and I'll get some fresh Annihilators in as well, who of course can set up 7 inches away from the enemy while the Imperatant is around, so that's why he's hiding. So, onto my opponent's army. So, here we go. It is Ogres. It is the Underguts Moor tribe, the Defend What's Ours grand strategy, so obviously they would like to be castling. There's a Firebelly, Tyrant, and a Butcher, who are mostly kind of spell casting, looking at the list here. So the Butcher has the Arcane Tome, and they've both taken spells. So the Firebelly has the Billowing Ash spell, which I believe is the -1 to hit bubble, which is going to be quite a lot of the army. I think it's is it 12 inches or 15 inches, something like that. And then the Butcher has got Blood Feast, and I can't remember what that does, to be honest, but I'm sure it's horrible. Then, Battle Line, there are 3 units of 4 Lead Belchers, which form the outer ring of the castle. So anything that's going to charge in is probably going to hit them and have hell unleashed on them. 2 units of 4 Iron Guts. And there are 3 Iron Blasters. So Iron Blasters have a longer threat range than Long Strikes, which is why both my units of Long Strikes start off the table, because I want to be able to just drop them down and immediately shoot. So another reason I would want the double turn in this particular game is because if my opponent chooses to go first, advances out, not only will they leave space for the Annihilators, but there's also a chance that when I drop the Long Strikes in, they'll be able to shoot twice in a row, because I could get a double if I'm going second. So not only that, I could also use because they're in the sky, it means on the first turn that I bring them down, I won't be able to use Thunderbolt Volley with them, because you have to do that in the hero phase before they arrive. But if I get 2 turns in a row, I could bring them down, shoot, get the next turn, then use Thunderbolt Volley, and then shoot again. So I could be, between the 2 units, if I get a double, I could be shooting 5 times between them before my opponent can react to it. So that is the dream. This particular scenario is head-on collision. So there's territories in those squares, like so, and 3 objectives. The one in your opponent's territory is worth a lot more points, though. The one in your opponent's territory is worth 4, I think, and the centre one is worth 2, and your own objective is only worth 1. However, you can't score until the second round, so there's not much incentive for my opponent to advance in round 1. And let's see, my opponent definitely had fewer drops than me, I think. Let's see, how many units are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, maybe it's the same. But my opponent definitely chose whether to go first or second, because there's no battle regiment here, so it wasn't a 1 drop. There is bounty hunters, which the lead belchers are in, and then a warlord battalion as well. So, on we go. So my opponent is going first, and immediate battle tactic against the odds, which is obviously a very easy one. Just sit there on your objective. So you can still, as far as I'm aware, you can still contest them, objectives, before they become active, but you can't control them yet. Is that right? Sounds right to me. So the only thing you can really score is a battle tactic in the first round. Now, thinking back, did my opponent actually get to choose whether to go first or second, or did I make him go first? Because I think we've got the same number of drops. I can't remember who won the roll-off. Because I definitely would have made my opponent go first, I think. I had the choice. So in my turn, there's not a lot for me to do, really, because I do not want to get too close to the enemy, with a chariot, for instance, and there's nowhere for me to land my annihilators yet that's particularly exciting. So I just did against the odds as well, moved a little bit, and moved my heroes around a little bit. So, okay, I end up with the second turn. So this is where my opponent wins the roll-off. So, my opponent won the roll-off in the second round and made me go next, because my opponent then will have extra turns to advance out without worrying as much about me dropping units in. So that's probably the right thing to do. Get me to commit some units down while he's still in castle formation. So, you can see what I did. I brought some annihilators down and thought, you know what, I'll go and eat some lead belchers, and then that'll have to be a good enough job for them for now. And then I will bring some judicators down to shoot up the enemy a bit first. You can see I've killed a few models there, I think. Bring down some liberators to get on the objective now that it's active, and just get everyone else poised, because obviously against my army you do not want to give me a double turn, because the long strikes will come down and they'll shoot a million times before you can react to it. So because I'm definitely not getting a double, you can see that the long strikes have not actually come down yet, because I would rather wait until the next round when I may get the chance of a double. So I did bring down some annihilators, but they reroll their charge after it failed with a 5, but I rolled 5 again. So they're just sitting ducks, and they're going to be dead after accomplishing nothing now. So they could have maybe waited for the next turn. And there we go. So the liberators have taken that, which you can see is a proving ground. So I failed my battle tactic in this round because I chose gaining momentum, pick an enemy unit, and I chose those lead belchers because I was fairly sure I was just going to eat them for breakfast. The annihilators, had they made their rerollable 7-inch charge, were just going to annihilate them, as the name would suggest. But it's a failure. In my opponent's round 2, outmuscle is chosen because there's a liberator unit on the proving ground, and they are now dead. However, I do immediately bring them back with a command point with call for aid, so it's a fresh unit, so they're no longer expert conquerors, but they're still contesting that proving ground, which means that my opponent does not control it, so it's going to be one less victory point. But the battle tactic is still accomplished. The Annihilators start getting shot, which isn't very nice, and the fresh Liberators start getting shot as well. So you can see the Annihilators still around, which is rare. When they land in no man's land like that, they often get obliterated. And in the next round, so my opponent is taking the next turn. And nope, that was the out muscle. So I go next. And I believe my opponent forced me to go next as well. Because as it stands, there's not much I can do, and he's wisely preventing me from taking the double turn. So if I had won the roll-off there, I would have made my opponent go next, because all my juicy stuff isn't down on the table, and I'd be setting myself up for a double. So what am I going to do with this turn? Because the castle is still very much intact, which is annoying, and now because I'm having to go first in round 3, all my units are going to have to come down out of the sky now, on a single turn, with no chance of a double, because otherwise they'll just disappear. So I brought some Annihilators in to these guys, and you can see that a few casualties dished out, but they're now dead. The other Annihilators came in and killed off the unit that were here. So in fact, you can see that I killed the... let's see. So these Iron Guts are all dead, thanks to the Annihilators. The Lead Belchers have been shot a bit, and one of the Iron Blasters has taken some serious damage. I was hoping to just shoot off the Iron Blasters, but the Long Strikes didn't perform that well with the shooting, which is sad. So all the Iron Blasters are still up. That's a corpse pile at the back there, they're not actually around. You can see the Judicators have been down here for a while, just in cover. So, my shooting is now on the table. It's vulnerable to being Iron Blasted to death. So we'll see what happens. I did get eye for an eye though, because I did wipe out a unit. And I am holding my own objective. And I'm not holding the middle one though. I don't think I am, at least. Wait a second. How did I get 4 points? That must be a mistake. I'll probably correct it later. Because I think if I am holding this one, I should have got 5. And if I'm not holding it, I should have got 3. So, my opponent is starting to move out now, because all my units are down. So there's no reason to just stay in the castle anymore. Nothing can teleport behind them, and all my shooting is out. And you can see that the Long Strikes are immediately dead, as expected. They just get an Iron Blaster to the face, each of them. So that's a huge amount of points dead, and that's why it was so important to deny me the double turn, because only allowing them to shoot once during the game is obviously really bad for them. Over here, all the guns are lined up, and look how much stuff is getting blasted off now. Judicators just take a single wound. Annihilators are getting attacked by the... I think that's the Tyrant. And it's not looking good. Models dropping left and right. There's a lot of enemy meat left, and I don't have much punch remaining in my army at all. So, plenty of points for my opponent there. And starting to slide away from me, the points total here. I go next though, and I desecrate this piece of land with the Knight Encounter by translocating her there just to get the battle tactic. And that's about all I can do, because the Chariot does get in there, into combat. But there's a lot of enemies, and look at that, still 3 healthy Iron Blasters, and I'm down to my heroes, Liberators, some Judicators. The Chariot's still alive, but my 4 most dangerous units are all dead. So don't really stand much of a chance, so I'm just going to try and maximise points for the rest of this game now. So, I get my battle tactic and I hold my own objective, so I'm just racking up as many points as possible between now and the end of the game. My opponent goes for gaining momentum, which is basically a guarantee because a unit is going to die. And the Chariot is in some serious peril with all these things aimed at it. Judicators are also in peril, but at least they're in cover and there's less stuff over here to fight them. But they're not really affecting the game particularly. A couple of them do die anyway, and the Chariot's dead. So, it's still looking very unhealthy, but I've got the units to squeeze more points out of it. So, gaining momentum was achieved. Then my opponent goes next in round 5, and barge through enemy lines is an obvious choice. So in round 5, I believe I won the roll. I won the priority roll, and I was working out what would be most benefit to me. Because if I go next, I could score a battle tactic, and that's it. If I let my opponent go next, it means I can choose this as the proving ground, which prevents this hero from taking it off me under any circumstances. So I decided that in the end that's going to be worth more to have this, because that's going to deprive my opponent of 4 points for claiming my objective, rather than me just gaining a 2-point battle tactic and a guaranteed point for holding this if I went next. So I would have scored 3 points and then given away possibly 4 by losing this. So I decided to let my opponent go next and made this the proving ground. That way only Galatian veterans can contest it. And in my opponent's next turn, you can see lots of points and not many for me. So in the final round, actually, in the final turn for me, I did have a chance to accomplish a battle tactic, even though I chose to forego the chance to get an easy battle tactic. I threw everything into this hero, and the battle tactic is a Stormcast book one, where if you kill a hero with a friendly Redeemer unit, so if the Liberators had killed this hero, I would have got my battle tactic, but alas, they did not. So lots of Ogres left, not many Stormcast left, and I will look at the pairings here. So we started off on table 20 in round 1, so the only way is up from there really, but it ended up being in tournament terms, a 16-4 win for my opponent due to the margin of victory here. So for every 2 points difference between you in victory points, it's worth 1 tournament point. So let's see what we've got here. So 6, 10, 14 for me only, and my opponent's got 13, 18, 24, and a grand strategy as well, which isn't represented on here yet. There we go, grand strategy, so 27. So with all those points, that's enough for a 16-4 loss for me. On to round 2. And this time, let's see, I'll bring up my opponent's list here. But we're on the Mighty and the Cunning. So there are 4 objectives along the centre, and it's fairly standard. So 1 victory point if you control 1, 1 if you control 2, 1 if you control more, and 2 for your battle tactic. However, interesting note on this one, you give up victory points if your Galatian veteran units are killed, which is just really bad rule, I think, to include. But anyway, that means because my opponent's grand strategy is also dependent on killing one of my units, the one with the most wounds, then if I lose my Liberators, my Judicators, or my Chariot, I'm giving up multiple victory points each time because of the scenario and the grand strategy. So if I get any of my battle line units killed, any of my Galatian veteran units killed, then it's starting to look very bad, because generally my list doesn't stop people scoring. It scores for me because I can teleport around the place, but I can't stop them holding objectives because I just don't have the bodies to do it usually, or the sturdy units that you need to do it. So even though Liberators are going to be worth 3 each, they still die to something big and nasty that wants to take the objective off them. So I'm just going to try and keep all my Galatian veterans alive for the whole game, keep them safe, and then jump them around later on. You can see him against Sons of Beermat here, and Kragnos is in there. So, you may have heard me talk about him before. He is the dream for my army, because he doesn't have that many wounds. I think he's got 18, but he has 720 points. So he is 3 times the cost of an Annihilator unit or a Long Strike unit, which means that if the Annihilators take him down in one round, which they're very capable of doing, then they've just tripled their points already. And it's a huge slice of the opponent's army gone instantly. So he's like the archetypal model that I want to see opposite me on the table. Because my army's built to take down stuff like that. Mega Gargants are a little bit different. I still like to see them, because it's a big monster, and that's what my army's designed to kill, but they do have a zillion wounds, so they're much more tricky to take down. So there's obviously Kragnos, 2 Megas and 2 Minis in there. So there is a Kraken Eater, who is the general, which is, I believe, this one, the pale one. And that is the Amber Bone Totem and Extra Calloused Feet. In fact, there's 2 Kraken Eaters, actually, so I think that one is the general, though. Although I would have no way of knowing if I don't remember precisely. That one over there has the Arcane Tome and Flaming Weapon. Might be the other way around, actually. Might be this one with Arcane Tome. Either way. And then there are 2 individual Man Crushers there. So, that's exactly 2,000 points as well. Very simple list, not many units. And what have I got deployed on the table and off the table? So, we've got the long strikes off the table because my opponent does have some shooting attacks with a reasonable range that don't trouble most units, but something like long strikes where there's only 6 wounds in the unit do not want rocks thrown at them. And all this terrain does completely block line of sight, by the way. So I did have a choice to have some long strikes on the table and then immediately translocate them into a new position to shoot, but I thought I'll just keep them off the table. And I've got the Knight Incanter over there. So I think, yeah, one of those 2 is obviously the caster, which is why she's over there to try and do some unbinding. And she's also in a position where she can see one of them so that her spell can target somebody. I've got the Chariot in the middle because I've marked these 2 as potential targets that a Chariot could take down. So if a Chariot kills a Man Crusher, I think that's a pretty good deal. We've got some Liberators down on the table because they have to be, because of the units I want off the table. I want my Judicators off the table as well because they're short range shooting and they'll die. But anything I drop down behind enemy lines is going to be really annoying for them to deal with in this game. Because there are 4 objectives, my opponent's only got 5 units. So as soon as I kill something, they need something on each objective if they want to hold them all. And anything I put down at the back is just going to be a really annoying distraction. So I want all my shooting off the table so I can bring some of it down back there maybe later on. The Annihilator's obviously going to be going straight for Craggy Boy. There he is with his tiny little face. And there's the big lads. So I've got all these units here within range to be translocated by the Relictor, in case I want to do that, including the Chariot. So my opponent gets the first turn, which is fine by me, and goes for it against the odds. Very easy one. Gets a Kraken Eater straight onto that objective. So what my opponent is going to do, probably, is kick some of these objectives closer together. So it's less space to contest them with limited number of units. But you can't do that yet, you can only do it in the hero phase. This one has been Mystic Shielded, because that one's going right out to the open in front of my army. And the minis head over to this one, and Kragnos is going for that one. So, accomplished with the battle tactic, and picked up some objectives. Now, in my turn, I immediately land the Long Strikes and the Imperatant down here. The reason for landing the Imperatant there is because he gets a free command point per turn. So while he's around them, he can be issuing that free command to that unit, rather than just wasting it being at the back on his own. So he was translocated, they came down from the heavens, and then had a shooting round at Kragnos, who was also attacked by Annihilators. But you'll notice he's not dead. He's on 14 wounds out of 18. And yeah, that's not very friendly. The Annihilators that came down got killed by him. So he's taken a lot of wounds, and he is susceptible to maybe a bit of Unleash Hell if he wants to charge in there. You'll notice that one of the minis was killed by the Chariot as well, so I'm satisfied with that. Because taking those guys out means that if I kill both of them, is down to 3 units when there are 4 objectives on the table, and I've got teleporting abilities, so it's going to be really tricky to deal with me later in the game if I just chip things away. I'm confident I can kill the other mini and Craggy, which leaves just 2 Mega Gargants to avoid for the whole game. So you can see the other long strikes here as well. So all this stuff was shooting at Cragster, and he's still alive. Then, Desecrate Their Lands was played. So that was... Let's see. I think I played Desecrate Their Lands. Okay, yeah, here's what happened. So, there was a piece of terrain here, you may recall. And I was desecrating that piece of land with a teleported unit there. However, apparently every time you wound Kragnos, at the end of that phase, he can bellow and just destroy buildings. So that actually happened to the building there, which meant I could no longer desecrate that piece of land because it didn't exist. Which meant I scored 0 points in that round, because I'm ignoring all the objectives because I don't want to go near the Gargants. So that is definitely a wah 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 moment. So 0 points in round 1. Now onto my opponent. Turn 2 goes eye for an eye because I killed a mini, and it's fairly confident he's going to kill something. So there is some objective kicking going on. So one of them's been kicked over there. One of them gets kicked backwards a little bit under the base by this one. And then this Mega is heading over to join in the fight on the chariot. This one coming back into the middle where the objectives are heading. And Kragnos gets in and manages to kill everything in sight. So he kills the Imperatant and he kills the Long Strikes. Oh dear, oh dear. Even though I played all out defense on him, tried to keep him alive, but he's dead, which means the next unit of Annihilators that come down will have to do a 9-inch charge instead, so they're all dead. I feel like that's a bit unfortunate, and that Kragnos should be dead by now. But oh well. The chariot dies, which does give up the grand strategy, but I felt like it was too important to actually use the chariot in the game. I couldn't just leave half my army out of the game to preserve victory points like that. So, Kragnos is definitely going to die, surely, next round when I shoot him. And then I can bring down the next Annihilators and try and go after one of the Megas, and I could get a double turn. Because this is the time I want to go second in round 2, so then I can maybe get the double in round 2 going into 3, which I think is the best time for it. So I go eye for an eye as well, trying to get my first victory points of the game. I'm 10-0 down already, and I'm definitely going to do some killing. You can see that the Mega has taken lots of wounds, the Mini is dead, my Annihilators are dead, but the Annihilators did most of that damage to the Mega, so he's on 26 wounds, I think, out of 35, so he's really, really damaged. And he's about twice the points of an Annihilator unit, so that's a good use of them, making him almost dead. The Mini was taken down by the Judicators, who I landed here, and the Long Strikes finished off Kragnos. So, it suddenly turned round. It was looking really bad for a moment there, but we've now only got 2 Megas left, and one of them has not got many wounds left. The downside is that I'm way behind on victory points after that horrendous first round of scoring 0, some of which was intentional, because I just didn't want to go near the enemy yet. So, I got eye for an eye, but I'm not holding objectives yet, particularly, apart from this one. So, I could do with a double now to finish that guy off before he gets to murder me. However, as you can see, moving towards me, I use a command point to redeploy the Judicators down here, though, to try and get them away, because they need to survive. And the other one gets into the Liberators, because I can't redeploy 2 units. So I didn't get the double there. And he went for gaining momentum. However, you have to kill a unit to accomplish that. And only killed 1 Liberator with a Mega Gargant, which is hilarious. And only killed 2 Judicators with a rock throw, I think. And failed to charge into them. Because first of all they'd redeployed, and then the rock throw actually took away the 2 at the front and made them harder to charge. So, yeah, so that's a failed charge, and failure to kill the Liberators. So now I'm still in a position where I could get the double. So I can move away from this Gargant with the Liberators and keep them alive and preserve the points, the bonus points that are dished out for this battle plan for Galatian veterans dying, which is very annoying. And I can definitely kill this one this turn. This one up here, the pale one, and the darker one. I probably won't kill that for the rest of the game because it's got too many wounds left, so I can just avoid it and start teleporting around onto objectives. So I go for against the odds, pick an enemy unit that I'm going to kill. Obviously, the big mega right there is the one I want. And hold on. Let's see here. Is there a picture missing somewhere? I think maybe I picked a different one in the end. Let's see. 3, 5, and then I'm trying to look for the next shot of my victory points. Did I just fail to kill it and then score 0 again? That is entirely possible, actually. I am thinking that is what happened. So I think this guy was actually maybe... No, he can't have been... I can't have got 0 because I must have been controlling some objectives by then. Yeah, so if we go back... So I'm controlling this one. Okay, I see. So, yeah, so it was my round 3, so I got 5 victory points there. Because Against All Odds was here. So I used the... I think I used the Relictor with Against All Odds to get this objective. The Liberators were brought in or translocated up there. And I believe I'm still holding this one because it's the Proving Ground. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Then in round 4, my opponent goes for this one's mine and picks the Lord Relictor. So I don't think this is the best choice because they're not that close to him. He's going to be able to redeploy. And they can't corner him because they're both coming at him in a direction that's going to allow him to run away this way. But I'm not sure whether there was another battle tactic that was doable. But maybe. If these guys are on the Proving Ground, maybe Outmuscle would have been a better choice. But I think he's also thinking the bigger picture is that you have to get rid of the Relictor because later on in the game, the last 2 turns, I'm just going to be teleporting and translocating everywhere and picking up all the objectives easily and hiding. So maybe just thought, I'm going to prioritise killing that guy anyway, I might as well tie in a battle tactic with it. So the Relictor does redeploy away a bit, and I even put Finest Hour on him, but they failed their charges anyway, so only 2 points there for the Sons of Beermat. And we're going to go into my turn 4 now, and I choose Gaining Momentum at this point, because I'm definitely going to kill that mega, and I do kill it. And I start spreading out my units. I've got units moving up this way to make sure I'm going to be able to do my grand strategy easily and covering the objectives. So the Liberators had been holding this one, and they can also come and get this one. I think they are actually holding this one now, because this guy's just moved, so he's just within 6 of this objective. So they're already holding this one, so that's mine, and now they've taken this one. This one is still mine. That one is still mine, so I think I'm holding all of them at the moment, and there's only one mega chasing me around. It's going to be close in score, though, because of that first round where I didn't score anything. So the mega is kind of stuck. So what he actually wants to do now is get bonus victory points for killing my battle line. And these Liberators are sitting here. So, what... Okay, so I got the first crack at round 5, which is why I was able to get 1,000,000 points there. Because I've spread out, I did my... I would have done barge through enemy lines, I think, at this point, if I hadn't already done that. I think I did it here, because I could get the bonus points for it, because the Judicators and the Liberators are both Galatian veteran units from my starting army. So they're able to be in there. They're behind the terrain there somewhere. So those two gave me a bonus point for my battle tactic. I also spread out my units so that the Kraken Eater cannot go around this way to easily get to the Liberators. And if he wants to go around that way, it's actually an 11 or 12-inch charge to reach them. So they're safe-ish. Because if they die, they're going to give up 2 victory points for being Galatian veterans in this battle plan. So my opponent picks Desecrate the Land and picks this piece of terrain because it's impossible to fail with that one. And ends up deciding that it's not worth trying to go for the charge on them. Well, actually, he gets to about here and then rolls and doesn't roll high enough to reach the Liberators and then chooses to go after the Relictor instead because there is actually range on it, but doesn't kill him. So the land is desecrated, but you can see it started off good for the Suns, but trailing off towards the end, not many points scored. A grand strategy is scored though from killing the Chariot. I scored 0 and then started creeping up again. So my opponent started off with 10 from the first 2 rounds and then jumped it up to 15 there and then another 5 on top of that. So 20 for my opponent. I started off with 0, then 3, then managed to work my way up to 8 and 13 and 19 and 22, which is just enough for a small win. So considering I scored 0 in the first round, I'm fairly satisfied with that, I think. And I think if I'd had a bit more luck at the start of the game, if Kragnos had died earlier and not killed my long strikes and the Imperator, I think it would have gone a lot smoother. On to the next round. So into round 3. We're playing the In the Presence of Idols scenario, and I'm at the lofty heights of table 13 at this stage. So I'm just going to open up my opponent's list here on the app. So in this scenario, you've got 3 objectives that you score in the standard manner. The other interesting feature is that after deployment, you pick 3 units on the battlefield to become your idols, which means that if you kill enemy idols with those units, then you get bonus victory points. So, just a small little bonus that you can get there. And it's an interesting one for my army in particular, because most of my powerful stuff isn't going to be on the table at the start, so I can't select it as an idol. So you want to pick things that can do killing, but preferably things that aren't going to easily get killed by enemy idols as well. And if you're particularly eagle-eyed here, you'll see that I'm up against ogres again. And let's go through the list. It's way less shooty than the last one. So there is a Huskard on Thundertusk with a Vulture to throw. There is a Frostlord on Stonehorn. There is a Butcher and a Firebelly. So the foot heroes are down here. The big monsters there. And yeah, so I actually didn't touch on it at all in the last game, but because of my sub-faction, the Astral Templars, it helps a lot against the Sons of Behemat, stops them doing their monstrous rampages against any of my units. It also stops these big monsters using theirs as well. So that's going to work out nicely in this game also. Then, what else have we got in here? So there is a Mournfang pack, which is there, 2 of them. Another unit of 2 there. There is an Iron Blaster there. And there is also a Gorger, which is that guy there, who can come in anywhere. Just pops up on the table and is only 80 points. So the Bounty Hunters, who have we got in there? We've got the Mournfangs and Stonehorn Beast Riders, which would be, I think that's that one, because there's 2 guys on it. That would make sense if that's the Stonehorn. I'm not sure which is which out of the others, to be honest. Oh, actually, there's the one with the bird. Yeah, so that makes it nice and easy. So that would be the Huskard, and the one at the back there would be the Frostlord, who is the most expensive one, this one here. 445 points. So any of these would be a nice viable target for Annihilators, definitely. All quite expensive, all over 300 points. And the Iron Blaster is obviously scary, but there's only 1. So, how have I set up here? I've got off the table with 1 unit of Long Strikes, the Judicators, 1 unit of Liberators, and all the Annihilators. So Liberators being off the table is generally to keep them alive long enough so that later in the game they can be dropped down on an objective. Annihilators, self-explanatory, and the shooter units, it just means I can keep them safe and then drop them down to shoot when they need to. And keeping 1 unit of long strikes on the table means that in the first hero phase I get, I can use Thunderbolt Volley with them. And even if they can't see anything, I can still do it because I could translocate them first to here and then use Thunderbolt Volley. So they're perfectly safe hiding behind that terrain. Liberators out in the open, everyone else is hiding because they don't want to get gunned down. First round, and I'm going first. And I'm going for Against the Odds, which is a nice obvious starting one, which I think I play on the Liberators, who have to use a command point to auto-run onto one of the objectives. Long strikes come in, the other long strikes get translocated to here. Lots of shooting dished out. The Iron Blaster's dead, and the Fire Belly is dead as well. So really good start for the long strikes. And yeah, because I was actually thinking I might have to use all of them to kill the Iron Blaster, but the first unit just completely killed it, so the second one was able to go for the Fire Belly. So that's nice. I also brought down these Judicators here and shot the Mournfang and did 5 wounds. So you might think that's a crazy move, bringing Judicators down against the full force of the enemy army on an objective, so they want to go that way anyway. However, my plan for that is that when they come closer, I'm going to redeploy further down, so that when they fight me, they're then going to be in prime position for the Chariot to hit them. I think the Chariot hitting a unit of Mournfang that are probably already wounded is going to go very well. And also encourages them more so than it already is probably something you want to do, spreading out. Because in this scenario, of course, you want to spread out onto the objectives, but you don't want to spread out because there are Annihilators to come in who haven't come down yet. So if they can be lured over there, there's not that many units, so there are going to be gaps between them. So we'll see if my opponent can keep them all plugged or not. So, Against the Odds accomplished. My opponent goes for Against the Odds as well, which is pretty much a guarantee, and starts moving out. So, on the right-hand side, we've got the unhurt unit of Mournfang and the Stonehorn coming down towards this objective. The Mournfang and the Huskguard go after the Judicators, who redeploy further down here, and they do get charged. You can see that the wounds have healed back on the Mournfang. That's because there's lots of healing going on between the heroes. That charge is not made though. Some Judicators die, and then they all die. So they kind of did their job. The enemy up here were just out of range to take this objective off the Liberators, I think. So only 3 points. Battle tactic and holding an objective. I go next with Eye for an Eye. And the Chariot steams into the action and kills the Mournfang, as that was the goal. Annihilators drop down between these 2 big monsters and then fail their charge, their re-rollable charge. The 2 units of long strikes chip away quite a bit at this monster, so that's nice. So I did get my battle tactic because I did kill the Mournfang, and I am holding more objectives than my opponent. But the Annihilators failing to make their charge keeps it competitive here, because I think if those Annihilators here had made it into one of these monsters and killed them, I think we'd be looking at possibly game over at this early stage. So here all these big things are coming down ready to eat some Liberators, and these 2 going for the Chariot. So I've still got 1 unit of Annihilators to come in, and the other ones are standing up there. My opponent is running away from them for now. Now, you do have the dilemma when Annihilators fail to hit you and they're behind you. Do you bother going back to kill them, or do you just run away? Because they're slow and they might not catch you. However, if they do catch you, as Mr. Remington found out recently in a game, if you saw the last battle report, then he ran away from the Annihilators, but didn't run away fast enough, and they eventually caught up with him. So, if you're going to run away, you have to do it properly. chariot gets eaten for breakfast. There we go. And on my turn, I go for desecrate their lands. So the Annihilators who are chasing after the enemy could never get far enough beyond this piece of terrain to fail the battle tactic, so I just chose them to desecrate this. I've translocated some long strikes to the top of the table, away from the enemy threat, and some Annihilators down here. So, if you look, this is the thing that the Annihilators were going for, right there. And they murderate it. Murderate, murderize, murdify, all of the above. The long strike's doing some damage there as well. So these Annihilators are doing alright. The Liberators here move to form a bit of a screen in front of the long strikes, because there's only 2 of them, because I think one of them was killed by repeated eagles being thrown at them, and harpoons. So I only got 3 points for that round, because I'm not currently on all the objectives. My opponent goes for gaining momentum in round 3, so I'm going to have to kill one of my units and control more objectives, which shouldn't be difficult. And this big guy, did I have a unit there that was getting killed? I think he's just going for the Lord Imperatant. And the Butcher is hiding. So the long strikes, when these guys came closer to the Liberators, the long strikes relocated away, or redeployed should I say, because that way they definitely can't be reached with any long range spears or any long range attacks in combat. One of them is killed from the various little shooting attacks. There's pistols and all kinds of little things that these ogres have. The Liberators start getting munched. The Imperatant starts getting munched. But not quite that badly. Look, he's on his last wound. Oh, then he's dead. The Liberators are also dead. So, gaining momentum accomplished. And 6 points dished out there. Because... what was that bonus point for? Oh yeah, it was killing one of my idle units with an idle unit. So the ones I chose as idols were the Chariot. So it was, it was the Chariot dying, or the Imperatant. Yeah, because the Chariot died previously. So yeah, that's why my opponent's been picking up bonus points, because the Chariot and the Imperatant were my idols, and they've both been killed. So the Gorger has come down now on this objective. There. So I've got some Annihilators in no man's land who have been chasing the enemy and not doing any fighting. These ones did some killing and now they're in no man's land. But they are near an objective. And down here I've got all my heroes that are remaining, the 2 of them and some Liberators. So I think these Liberators died and then I brought them back to life with the call for aid so that the Relictor can then translocate them in the next turn somewhere else. So that's a really good combo of the Relictor and call for aid, because you just bring a unit back next to him and then you can put them where you really want them in the next turn. So my next go, I'm going for barge through enemy lines, because I've already got units up there, so it's going to be pretty much auto-complete. So I've shot up that Butcher quite a bit, killed a Mournfang with shooting as well. Annihilators coming down trying to chase after this big guy. The Relictor translocated the Liberators and then hid behind this building. The Annihilators slowly working their way down here. So yeah, Annihilators, once they land, they're very slow. So it's going to take a while. So I was only able to pick up 3 victory points again for that turn. My opponent goes for barge through enemy lines as well, which is an auto-complete. And kills the final long strike, I think. And this Mournfang is chasing after my heroes here, but doesn't get to them. This one is... is that the Stonehorn? No, that's the Scarred, is it? Oh no, that's the Frostlord. So the Frostlord is going after the Lord Relictor, and they eat him. So Relictor is dead. But it looks like I'm going to get my grand strategy at this stage, because I'm going to have more units in the opponent's half. So points being picked up. My opponent then goes next as well, and goes for this one's mine. And I believe picks the Incanter. So I've made this a proving ground now, which means that since my opponent has no Galatian veterans, that objective cannot be taken off me this turn. And I think the Knight Incanter does get eaten, so the battle tactic is accomplished. So consistent scoring after that first round. My scoring's tapered off a little bit because I wasn't able to hold all the objectives because there were big fat ogres on them. I go for gaining momentum because I can actually do that now. So I finish off this butcher with the shooting and dance onto some objectives, and I make sure I've got more of my units in my opponent's setup area than my opponent has, and that means I get my grand strategy, which means we end up with a grand total of 10, 22, 25 there, and on this side we have 10, 16, 21, 24, which means it's a draw. Because you need a difference of 2 points to win the game 11-9. You need 2 points to do that. And the difference is only 1, so it's a draw. Which, can't complain about it too much. I think these ogre monsters, I would have expected them to die by this point in the game, because that's what my army's designed to take out. But I think, considering I killed the Iron Blaster and the Firebelly immediately at the start of the game, I think my opponent did well to get a draw from that stage. But often against my army, you do lose things early on because my shooting is obviously very powerful, and I've got these kind of come down and one hit and then probably die annihilators. So early on in the game you're going to take a beating, but then later on that stuff is either not around or you're getting closer to it and it's about to die. So, and then really late game, the teleporting is very impactful for picking up battle tactics at the end because there's less units on the battlefield to protect the objectives. So, it's weird that none of the Annihilators died in this game. They did manage to kill something, but it's very rare. But it's worth running away from them if they're down, if you don't think it's worthwhile to go after them and kill them. By the way, I hope everyone's liked this video. And I am keeping an eye on the chat, by the way. Got David and Irrelevant Prime in there, and visibly Riley as well. Good evening. So, a draw. And we move on to the next round. Round 4. And let's see what table I'm on now. On table 11. So, I'm against the Soulblight Gravelords, led by Manfred von Karstein and a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. So, what I was told about Manfred before the game is that at the start of any combat phase he can just choose he doesn't want to be in it and teleport away. So you can't really kill him in combat, which is good to know. So that means if he's going to die, he has to be shot down. There is... let's see what else. There are 3 units of Blood Knights. There's one there, and one there. They're obviously very scary. And coming in at 195 points. So they're not really that great value for annihilation target. If the Annihilators come down and kill them and then die, I'm not making my points back on them. So they're a bit too cheap for them to be a perfect target for Annihilators. Obviously if I'm going to get a double, potentially, and I bring down Annihilators and kill them, and then move on to something else in the next turn, it becomes worth it. But if that's the only target and then I'm definitely going to die, then it's not worth it. 100%. One notable thing though, Blood Knights do improve as the game goes on, so you could look at it and say, well, if the Annihilators do kill them, that means that they're not improving as the game continues, which is also a fair observation. Did I even take a picture of the battle plan for this game? What? No picture of the battle plan? Okay, I'm going to have to go in the General's Handbook now and tell you which one it is, because I forgot to take a picture of it. So, let's go to battle plans. I know exactly which scenario it is, I just need to remember the name of it, because it's a very distinctive one, because it's the weird L-shaped deployment. So let's see what the name of it is, and as soon as I see it I'll think, oh yeah, that was it. It is the close to the chest. So it's the one with alpha objectives. So my setup area is kind of like that, my territory, and my opponent's territory is like that. So very weird, annoying to mark out at the start of the game. And my objectives are this one, and this one. So I can pick one of those each turn to be the alpha. And my opponent has to pick from his up there. So you can see I've got liberators here ready to pound straight onto this objective for scoring. My chariot is not that far forward because there are some very fast enemies there, particularly Zombie Dragon, Blood Knight's pretty fast as well. Relictor's hiding. And off the table I've got all my long strikes, my adjudicators, and all the annihilators. So all my shooting and the annihilators, because the stuff I really want to kill is at the back. Because, let me just look here. How many drops is this army? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's about 9 or 10, so it's less than me. So I'm not going to choose whether to go first or second. So if I put my long strikes on the table, there's a possibility that some skeletons could be summoned up from one of these grave sites, and then they could make a charge into them in the first turn. And if I put them further back than that, then they're not going to be in range to shoot in the first turn anyway, so there's not much reason for them to be on the table, if that makes sense. So I might as well keep them off the table, since I'm not choosing who's going first. And when they do come down, I'm going to focus fire and try and immediately kill the zombie dragon. So let's go through the rest of my opponent's list here. So after the Blood Knights, we've got Dire Wolves with a Doom Wolf, which is one big unit. There are 2 units of Death Rattle Skeletons who are in one of these boxes, so they're going to be summoned or raised. Then there is a big unit of Grave Guard as well. So 2 Standard Bearers in there, 2 Hornblowers, 280 point unit, the Grave Guard, so they're going to be able to come up as well. And Blood Knights starting on the table with Wolves as a screen, and you can see I get given the first turn here. So I think my opponent gives me the first turn, thinking that once he starts moving, that's when the Annihilators have really optimal places to land and they can go for the stuff they really want to fight, like the Zombie Dragon. So instead I decide, you know what, I'm just going to kill some Blood Knights. So the Annihilators come down, kill some Blood Knights, and the long strikes target the Zombie Dragon. You can see I brought down both units there, and the Knight Incanter is in front just to protect them, because it's going to be difficult for a Zombie Dragon to land here. So with their shooting, they only do 8 wounds though, which is really disappointing, because I would hope to do a lot more than that. But it does have a 6-up ward save, and it made a lot of ward saves, let me tell you that. It was these dice here, these purple ones with a skull on, which represents the 6, and that skull was coming up a lot on those ward saves. So his armour was definitely doing a good job, this Zombie Dragon. So I did get my Desecrate Their Lands battle tactic, which is a very easy one. I think I just picked this piece of terrain here, which was partly in my opponent's territory, and the Liberators just took it. So one thing I've decided in this game, I'm definitely not going to get the Alpha objective at any point in the game, because the Undead can just keep, or the Grave Lords should I say, can just keep raising more units to defend their Alpha objective, and I don't want to be inside the meat of the Undead army. I want to be kind of dancing around the edge of the table, shooting the dangerous stuff, and the chaff is kind of too annoying to deal with, because I think all these wolves have 2 wounds each. So 2 wound chaff is stuff that is a lot of commitment, because my shooting is really effective, but it's not the number of wounds that's effective, it's the quality of wounds. So I'm dishing out lots of mortal wounds, doing mortal wounds when I land with Annihilators and charge with Annihilators and charge with the Chariot. But all those mortal wounds are just as good on a big monster as they are on a wolf. So a 20 wound unit of wolves or a monster that's probably less than 20 wounds. Yeah, you can see why I'm leaning towards taking out the monsters. So in my opponent's turn, you can see here that because the grave sites, you have to be within a certain distance of them. I think it's within 12 of the grave site and 9 inches away from the enemy. So there's limited spaces to set up units. My opponent goes for barrage through enemy lines. And the skeletons that can be summoned do count as part of the starting army, because they're not like from a... It's not conjuring up a fresh unit, because they are actually in the army list. And Manfred is making his way down here, wants to eat some of this. Zombie Dragon flies away out of sight of the long strikes, wisely. One unit of Blood Knights is going after the Annihilators, and they eat them. The other Blood Knights are hanging around with the Wolves. The Wolves are on this objective now. The one that the Liberators dip their toe into. And you can see these skeletons have set up just to take these objectives from the grave sites. And the Grave Guard have popped up in the middle as well. So there's a big undead blob in the middle of the table now. And I'm just going to be trying to skirt round it, shooting things off when I can, and we'll see how it goes. But the fact that I did not that much damage to the Zombie Dragon in the first round has not filled me with confidence, because my list needs to be deleting something every turn. It needs to be making a precision strike and killing something really important in each turn. Because if I can't kill one important thing per turn, there's just going to be too much left for me to do at the end of the game, by which point the Annihilators have already come down and died, and the long strikes might have been reached by then. And the Chariot generally has one good combat where it charges, and then it can either get bogged down or hit by something that can kill it as well. So I need to be killing things, not just damaging things. So my opponent gets a bonus point for barrage through enemy lines with Galatian veterans, and also gets a bonus point for taking my alpha objective, just via taking all of them, so it didn't matter which one was the alpha. And in the next round, this becomes the proving ground that the Liberators are on. And I think, yeah, my opponent's got the double here. So, the Zombie Dragon is going to go down here after my heroes. Manfred is going after the Chariot, and the Skeletons are just chilling out on the objectives. Everyone else is just hiding from the long strikes, I think. And Desecrate Their Lands was an auto-complete, so there it is, and a bonus point for holding the alpha still. I go for barrage through enemy lines because it's going to be an auto-complete for me because I can teleport and just drop units down. So I've dropped in some Liberators up there. And the long strikes do actually manage to shoot off the Zombie Dragon, which is nice. They just move backwards a bit so they can see it and finish it off. So it would have been nice to kill it in turn 1, but it's dead now. And the Annihilators had to actually come down and help out as well, which is sad, because then they were also killed, I think. Or did they go after the Blood Knights? I think they may have gone after the Blood Knights, actually, the Annihilators. So the Liberators came down, or these were already on the objective here. I decided they were going to charge in and fight the Wolves, because I might as well start chipping away at them, see if I can eventually wear them down. And I think the Annihilators did have to go for the Zombie Dragon as well, because the long strikes did next to nothing to it. The long strikes just had a really poor game with their shooting, and with the ward saves being passed, they were only doing like 2 wounds per unit in this turn, I think. So the Annihilators had to actually join in there, which resulted in them being killed as well. And I think, the Annihilators were probably killed, and then I think the Imperatant may have finished off the Zombie Dragon. So I got my battle tactic, but I'm not holding that many objectives. So I think I'm only holding this one. So I'm not picking up a huge amount of points. Or am I holding... I'm holding this one as well. I'm holding these 2, but not the alpha objective. So just 4 points. My opponent goes eye for an eye, because there are lots of juicy targets available. You can see Blood Knights, Manfred getting in there, just covering all the objectives. So whatever I pick as the alpha, which I think has to be one of these 2 actually, the ones that are wholly within my territory, then I just can't defend them, so I'm giving up points there. The Liberators redeploy away from those Blood Knights to stay alive, and these ones are going after the Imperator. These Liberators are now surrounded by Graveguard after the Wolves run away, and they get chopped to bits. So Eye for an Eye was accomplished, and holding lots of objectives, including the Alpha. Lots of points are being scored. My turn, I go Eye for an Eye as well, because I should be able to kill a unit. However, so which unit did I pick? I pick this unit of Blood Knights. You know why? Because I've got all my long strikes, I've got my Judicators pointing at them, and I charge them with the Lord Imperator, and I use Lightning Blast on them. I get in position to use Lightning Blast by translocating the Knight Incanter here, so that that becomes the closest unit. So, Lightning Blast, 2 lots of long strikes. I think this may be where they use their Thunderbolt Volley in this turn as well, potentially. And the Judicators, all shooting into them, and the Lord Imperator throwing his baton at them and charging them, and all his attacks, all that fails to kill the unit. Wow. So that's a failed battle tactic, so only 2 points. I do get to go again after that though, and I go for against the odds. So I just have to hold an objective, and I choose the Knight Incanter to accomplish that. And I'm going to start shooting up the other unit of Blood Knights as well. So blasting away, and you'll see this one is actually comically still alive at the end. So obviously I didn't want to throw everything into this tiny unit that's only got 1 wound left on a Blood Knight, but it's still alive. That unit's mostly dead now though. So I got my battle tactic, but let's see, how did I end up with 3 points? Oh yeah, it's because these guys have backed away off this objective now, so they're not holding it anymore. That'll be it. So, my opponent goes for gaining momentum, so it's going to have to kill one of my units, and probably chooses the Lord Imperator right there, because he's already wounded and right out in the open, or these Liberators. But actually, no, runs away from the Liberators and is just going to try and kill the Imperator, which is fair. Manfred will just eat him, and does so. But one of the Blood Knights goes down as well. So this is a problem my army has. When there's lots of enemy wounds, things being summoned, and chaff units with multiple wounds, once they just take over the objectives in the middle of the table, I can't really get in there to stop them. My shooting units aren't going to go in there, so I just have to stand back and just hope that the shooting goes really well, and then start fighting with the stuff that can fight a little bit when the time comes. But I haven't really got anything left that can fight now. There's only really those Liberators, which aren't that much of a threat. So it's definitely game over already. It was game over a while ago. Maybe even immediately, as soon as I didn't do enough to the zombie dragon in the first turn, and then had to put massive resources into killing it in the next round. So lots of bonus points being picked up because I just can't keep these dead creatures off the Alpha objective, or any of the objectives for that matter. I go for the Stormcast book battle tactic to try and take down a hero that's got 10 wounds or more and hasn't got any wounds on it yet, because that was the only one I could actually accomplish, but failed. And yeah, that's how the game's going to end. I get my grand strategy because I've got lots of units in my opponent's territory, but my opponent also gets the grand strategy, which was, let's see, Lust for Domination, which I think is control the grave sites, which has clearly been accomplished. So overall, I've got a fair few models left, but they're not accomplishing anything because there's just too much stuff to chew through. So my army needs to be killing stuff early, and it needs to do it consistently. If I don't kill anything, then it very quickly unravels, because the units I need to kill stuff don't stick around very long. On to the next round. Yeah, so that one was clearly a loss, and it was by a decent margin. I mean, look at all those 6s. 1,000,000 points to not many points at all, which led to, let me tell you, the tournament point result. So it was an 18-2 loss, that one, which is obviously terrible. Moving on to round 4, and I'm on table 15, and up against Khorne. So it's been a long time since I faced Khorne. It may have actually been all the way back in 1st edition, possibly, facing the old Khorne. So it's the Silk Steel Nests, which is the one where you've got 8 objectives, 4 on each side, and if you control the one on the other side and you're within an inch of it, then you can burn it off from turn 2 onwards, I think, and you get a bonus point for it, and then it explodes and might hurt units nearby. So, against Khorne. What has Khorne brought to the dance? Well, there's Scarbrand, there is the Bloodthirster of Unfettered Fury, and the Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage. So there are 3 big Bloodthirster style characters in there. There is a Bloodsecrator and a Bloodstoker, which are just little infantry heroes. There are, let's see, the battle line, 2 units of 10 Blood Reavers, there and there. 2 units of 5 Fleshhounds, which are there and there. And then there's 5 Wrathmongers, which are back there somewhere, which are the ones with the big flaily chains. And then there are 2 units of 10 Chaos Warhounds. Some there, and I think there's some more there. So, Chaos Warhounds, I'm relieved to find out, only have 1 wound each. So we'll see if that makes it any easier to kill them. And Grand Strategy No Place for the Weak, which is kill my battle line, which is the worst possible grand strategy you could have when you come up against my army, because it's so easy for me to protect my battle line. And not only do I have the ability to keep them off the table for half the game, I can also teleport them with the Relictor. I can bring back a unit of Liberators, so I think that still counts as a unit of battle line still being alive. If it doesn't, let me know. If the grand strategy actually says no battle line left from the starting army, then they wouldn't count. So my setup, because there's 4 objectives to contest on each side, I've had to go quite wide with my deployment, which is a rookie mistake because it leaves you no place to set up your dice and all your measuring tools. So, poor mistake there. So definitely there's a dog screen situation going on here. The Bloodthirsters are not going to get hit by any Annihilators anytime soon. There's also a Skull Cannon which can potentially be summoned later. And there's this spell here as well, which is... well, it's not really a spell, I think it's an invocation, which is the Hex Gorgeous Skulls, which I think is like an anti-magic thing. So off the table, I've got some Long Strikes, Judicators, the Annihilators as usual, and 1 unit of Liberators for dropping onto objectives. Scarbrand, he is pretty nasty, so he's got all kinds of weird abilities, and yeah, he can move very fast, hit very hard, just scary all round, and he is 380 points. So yeah, any of those Bloodthirsters are a good target for Annihilators. They're all more expensive than them. So I've got units touching all the objectives, just because I want them. Nice cinematic shot there of the Long Strikes looking out at the Bloodthirster. And then focus shifts and you can see the Bloodthirster there. So, if we get a bit of a wider shot again, I'll tell you my plan for the Long Strikes. So, my opponent has the Battle Regiment and a Warlord Battalion, so it's far fewer drops than me, so my opponent's going to choose who goes first or second. I put the Long Strikes within 30 inches of this Bloodthirster, which means that if I get to go first, I'll be immediately doing the Thunderbolt Volley Holy Command, shooting it, and then bringing down the other Long Strikes probably here, and then shooting it with both of them in the shooting phase. So, my opponent has the choice whether to go first and hide from the Long Strikes so that that doesn't happen, or let me go first and just absorb some shooting. Could have also deployed the Bloodthirster further back, so it was unwise for me to put Long Strikes here, for instance, because then there's the potential of them just being charged in turn 1 by dogs or something, which would be bad. But let's see what happens. Who does my opponent give the first turn to? Well, my opponent goes first himself, chooses Desecrate their lands, and interestingly does not move the Bloodthirster out of range of the long strikes, which, if you're going to leave it in view, there's not much point of just moving it a couple of inches backwards, because I can just translocate them 2 inches forwards and then do Thunderbolt Volley anyway. So you're better off just leaving it where it is as much as you are moving it back an inch. So if you're going to move it at all, you would just want to get it out of sight. So it's not out of sight as it stands, and there's been that much of an advance here, just getting up onto the objectives and fanning out a little bit, but still wary about leaving gaps. Now, I personally, if I was this Khornate army, I would have probably, if you're going to leave this Bloodthirster here anyway, I would have liked to make the Stormcast player go first in this instance. So, Desecrate their land is picked up, and holding some victory points, but not more than me yet. So for my turn, I go for Desecrate their lands, and I just want to desecrate this with my Expert Conquerors that my opponent doesn't have, so can't compete with the Liberator's strength there. And the situation with the long strikes, as I described, goes off exactly as I described, and Bloodthirster is dead. So it is actually very difficult to stop my army killing something like that in the first turn. You can hide, or you can present so many targets that whatever I kill, I'm going to get hit with something. As it stands here, it's like a long-range shooting gallery. So I don't think there was much downside to me for focus firing on this. Now, I've not brought down any Annihilators yet because there's nothing really juicy for them to hit. However, the Chariot, there are some chaff units here that don't have a lot of wounds. So because I'm going second, I thought, you know what, that Chariot could go in there, it could clear one unit, and then it could go and clear a second unit if I get the first crack at round 2. So the Chariot, I usually look at it as just mortal wounds, so I want to put it into something big so the mortal wounds matter, but it's probably good for chaff clearing, because it's got quite a decent number of attacks. They're just not that high quality, but against chaff they're fine, and then the mortal wounds are obviously going to help. So if you're going to get a double and you can clear 2 units of chaff, you're probably getting your points back for the Chariot already just on that. So maybe I've been overlooking that potential role for the Chariot. So it gets in there, kills 4.5 Fleshhounds. There's 1 left, which is fine, because if I do get the double, I can just use the Night Incanter's spell to kill the last one, so that I can still go and charge something else. And I do Desecrate, so 4 points. And then I do get the double. So I got the double, and my opponent selected this as the proving ground, which gave me an instant battle tactic because there was an enemy Galatian veteran contesting it. So I was just immediately able to kill that and get a battle tactic. You don't always get a chance for outmuscle. So when the option does present itself, you got to take it while you can, because otherwise you may run out of battle tactics you can accomplish later in the game, but I've now saved some of the easier ones for later by using that one here. So the Chariot was then free to charge the Warhounds and killed all 10 of them, which is amazing. And the long strikes, I translocate 1 unit over here, and then they both shoot, and I decide that I'm just going to clear off all the chaff this turn. So they both take out 1 unit of Blood Reavers each. So all the dogs on that side are dead. The 2 units of Blood Reavers are dead. And you can see the Wrathmongers. So the right-hand side, as I look at it, is still intact for Khorne, but this side has just been completely taken out. So suddenly there's not much left for them now. They've got a Scarbrand, a Bloodthirster, Wrathmongers, some dogs, and an infantry hero or 2. But they don't have the numbers. Because it was very well populated, that side of the table, a minute ago. But because of that double turn, suddenly it's looking very sparse for Khorne. So I'm feeling pretty good about this game now. So, because that was the proving ground, however, that does mean the Chariot couldn't take it off them. So I'm not able to take that objective yet. So I got my battle tactic, and onto my opponent's turn. Bloodthirsters, this one looks to be coming this way, for the Chariot perhaps. And because the blood pool is building up, because I've been killing so many of the Khorne units, then they are actually able to summon some bloodletters here on this objective. And against the odds was selected, which was always a fairly simple one, and 5 points. So Khorne take the lead, but they're definitely not in the lead in terms of stuff being killed. And you can see that Bloodthirster did actually make it into the chariot, but didn't do much, and actually suffered a couple of wounds in return. So next up, my opponent gets the double and goes for barge through enemy lines, which is easy to accomplish with these Warhounds and these Bloodletters that had been summoned in previously. And they just want to sit on the middle of this objective so that they can burn it off, basically. They don't want to charge. And there's some more Bloodletters been summoned there as well. Now, I found this really interesting that this Bloodthirster moved away from the chariot. I don't know why. I forgot to ask why this was done. Because the chariot isn't that amazing at fighting. And moving away from it, if you're not going to kill it, I'm guaranteed to go next. So surely you're just going to get charged by it and eat loads of mortal wounds. If someone understands why this Bloodthirster wants to move away from the chariot, let me know. But I forgot to ask at the time. And maybe there's something in the rules that makes this not a silly move. You can see this invocation here as well that's doing its job, and I think hindering some of my magic. There's also one of the Khorne heroes has an ability where if they unbind one of my spells by rolling an 8, then I take d6 mortal wounds, I think. And also, if I miscast a spell, I think it's while these are on the table, then I take d6 mortal wounds as well, so my wizards are in a bit of peril. So this objective gets burnt off by the Bloodletters. So a bonus point, and Khorne is still scoring solidly, but not that many units alive, and they have just had a double, so I could potentially get another double now. So my turn, I go against the odds, pick one unit to hold an objective, which is obviously an auto. And the chariot steams in there and kills the Bloodthirster, which is exactly what seemed likely to happen, because these two long strikes, one of whom was killed, but I translocated them up here so that they can survive, because a unit of 2 is just as useful for my grand strategy, for example. So they pop up there so they can lend their shooting support to finish off that Bloodthirster with the chariot charging in to actually put the finishing touch on it. Down here, I've brought in some Judicators on this objective, and I had to bring down all my Annihilators now. The reason I didn't bring any down in turn 2 is because it just didn't look optimal. So I've had to bring one of them down 9 inches away, which is this one. So I also bring down a unit here, 7 inches away from these hounds, but fail the charge on the rerollable 7 inches. So it happens way more often than you expect, that failing the rerollable 7-inch charge. And I did manage to put some wounds on Scarbrand with the Judicators though, so I am holding this objective. And I did burn off an objective as well this round. I think I burned off that one over there with the chariot. So bonus point scored, and I'm only a little bit behind now. My opponent gets the next go though, so I don't get a double there, and goes eye for an eye. Is that right? Yeah, I think I flipped over the wrong dice. I think this one should say 4. So eye for an eye, I make this the proving ground. And my opponent moves these Bloodletters onto the middle of the objective, hoping to burn it off, but I then redeploy the Imperatant from here into the objective zone, which means that no enemy units can now be summoned on this objective because he's too far into it, so they would have to be deploying off the edge of it suddenly because he's now in there. And there's not much else to be done. There's the unit that was summoned in, but as you can see, not enough of them can get on the objective to control it now because the Imperatant's there. Scarbrand goes after the Annihilators and starts eating them. The first 2 Bloodletters go in, eat and unleash hell and get killed, and then the next batch of them go into the Imperatant and do a bit of wounding. But then they all die. So yeah, the Imperatant just smashes the Bloodletters to bits. which is nice. All the Annihilators are dead there, though. So the Annihilators failing their charge, that's what happens. And these ones are kind of stuck because they had to be 9 inches away when they came down, because the previous turn there was just no optimal spot to put them in. So I'd rather have a chance at charging something good the next turn, rather than having a good chance of charging something that's not worth it. Even though, as it turned out, I'd already killed the other juicy targets when they came down. So my opponent accomplished the eye for an eye, but does not hold more objectives than me currently. My turn, I go for gaining momentum, so pick an enemy unit to kill. And I think there was a unit that's got barely any models left in it. I think it was there's some hounds, I think. But I'm killing a lot of units anyway. Got the long strikes moving up here so they can shoot the Wrathmongers that are behind there. Chariots going in after the... Who's that guy? Is that the Blood Stoker? Or the Blood Secretor? It's the Blood something. The Chariot's going to go and kill him, hopefully being on this objective, and then burn it. So, Wrathmonger's shot down. Chariot murders that character. The Judicators do more shooting. I think they shoot the hounds, and there's only 1 wound left in there now. Scarbrand is still up though. And these Annihilators kind of just chilling out because they're so slow. And the Chariot does burn off that objective to get me a bonus point. So at this stage, you can see I've got some Liberators all the way up here as well. And I'm definitely going to get my grand strategy unless something really weird happens. And it's kind of an avalanche going in my favour at the moment. Just from killing all that stuff early on, Khorne just don't have enough. They've been doing well to score as the game goes on, but in the last couple of turns, it's going to be more of a struggle, I think, for them. So I get my battle tactic with the bonus point for burning off. My opponent... Okay, is that the last... Yeah, okay, so there's not many pictures right at the end here. So what happens is, I get the first crack at round 5. So I'm able to get max points because I can do a battle tactic. I might have even saved barge through enemy lines for this stage. And I was able to accomplish that. I was able to kill everything because let's see, okay, so I translocated the Annihilators up here. They had to be 9 inches away from the hounds though. I then shot down the hounds with the Judicators and then made a 12-inch charge into Scarbrand. And they needed a 12 as well. So the Annihilators got 12-inch charge into Scarbrand, did loads of mortal wounds, and then just smashed him into a million pieces. The hero here was shot down, and it was a tabling. So the game doesn't end though. So I got maximum points in round 5, and then in my opponent's round 5, he was able to bring in a fresh unit of Bloodletters and just take an objective, and score a battle tactic by dealing out a mortal wound to the Knight Incanter with some ability. And the battle tactic was, I think it's a special Khorne one, like Slay the Sorcerer, something like that. So the battle tactic was actually accomplished and an objective was picked up, which led to 3 points at the end. So I got 5 in my last turn, and I got 3 for my grand strategy. So you completely table someone, but then they get another turn and they're able to bring another unit in. So it's not a tabling after all. So, okay, Knight Incanter, funny incident. So, the Incanter and the Relictor and the Imperatant were wounded at various points in this game. Not particularly by the enemy. It's because they would cast a spell or do a prayer and it would be stopped, it would be unbound or what have you, and the number that was rolled on the unbinding was the one number that results in me taking d6 mortal wounds. And then, when I would use my heroic recovery, every turn I failed the roll to heroically recover. So the Knight Incanter was just chilling out on 1 wound for a lot of the game because of that. And then that battle tactic was able to be cashed in right at the end to finish her off with that ability that just does a mortal wound. So, final score, I've got 8, 14, 20, 28, which is a respectable amount, and my opponent amasses a total of 19, 22. So 28, 22, a nice healthy win to end on there, and that game has given me a lot to think about, actually. So it's a 13-7 win in tournament terms, and it could open up some thinking in my playstyle with the Stormcast, because I always go in with the mindset of I have to kill the most dangerous stuff. But really, I think maybe I've been neglecting killing the enemy chaff and just the general point scoring units over the tournaments so far. I think I've been neglecting that side of the game, so that later on in the game I'm not able to build up a lead because the enemy is always scoring points because they've always got these crummy units left, and by that point in the game I don't have much to kill them with. So, like the chariot here did a really good job clearing out chaff. That just steamed through the opposing army. It even steamed through a bloodthirster. Partly because it retreated from the chariot and then I was able to get a fresh charge on it. The long strikes did a good job in this game because they were also shooting, apart from when they murdered the bloodthirster in the first turn, they also killed some chaff units. So I think maybe it's just a Khorne thing and all their chaff only has 1 wound each, because if I was shooting at Nurgle chaff or Skaven chaff where you've got millions of them or they have multiple wounds, it's not quite so effective. But maybe something like the chariot, maybe it should be in there as a chaff clearer, rather than thinking it does mortal wounds, it has to go for the big exciting stuff. So there's definitely something for me to think about there. And what else could I bring to this Stormcast army? Well, I'm currently painting some Vanquishers, so if they're becoming the new Liberators for this season, then I'll be equipped to deal with that eventuality. They're slightly cheaper than Liberators in points, and against certain opponents they can do a lot more damage. So, looking forward to getting them out on the table. The models are really cool and dynamic as well. Back in the day when AOS first came out, the models were very static, I think, and they've got more dynamic as time has gone on. So, looking forward to that. I was listening to on the Stormkeep YouTube channel, the Stormcast Eternals tactical haven, if you will, and they think that castigators could have a role now, which were from the Soul Wars era, there's like mini grenade launchers they have, I suppose, just three models in the unit shooting little grenades out, and they're very cheap. So I've actually got some of those, but unpainted, so I could actually get those on the painting table soon as well and work on them. So that would add some more stuff for my Stormcast. I've still got Krondis to paint. And yeah, a lot of interesting stuff. And with the new season favouring foot heroes, or non-mounted heroes, because some of them aren't technically on foot if they're flying around. But the flying hero, like the Azeros, apparently he's going to be good now. I may even be able to work with the Knight Heraldor. Well, maybe not him, but I'll try him. I'll give him a go. I don't know about the Lord Ordinator. I don't think he's got a role, unfortunately. But it's going to be fun times, because I've got a lot of heroes from first edition that haven't seen the table in a while, or if they have, it's not been in a very competitive manner. I'm looking forward to trying out some new list shenanigans. Maybe I'll even go to a tournament without Annihilators. Wouldn't that be interesting? Because there is a tournament I'm going to this Wednesday that's only 1,000 points. And in fact, if you want a spoiler, I can tell you the list that I'm thinking of taking to that right now. So, here is my list. So, it is Hammers of Sigmar, because I want my Concussors to be battle line, because you have to fill 2 battle line slots and it's only 1,000 points. So I don't want to have to use 2 units of Liberators. So there is 1 unit of Liberators, but there's a unit of Concussors, there's a Chariot in there, there's 1 unit of Longstrike Raptors, and the 5th and final unit is the Lord Celestant on Dracoth. And you may think, people don't really take that, but on the social medias, I've been asking some people for feedback, and one idea that someone had that seems like it but would work okay is the Lord Celestant on Dracoth with the Luckstone, so that when he zaps down from the heavens, you can auto-pass the charge. And then if you give him one of the weapons that does more damage or more attacks on the charge, he can actually be pretty tasty. And you can also give him the Celestial Instincts mount trait, which means he can retreat and charge in the same turn. So you can get him down guaranteeing the charge and then doing multiple charges over various turns. So yeah, I think that's going to be interesting. So giving him a try. Yes, like a mini Celestant Prime for only 215 points. So we'll see how that goes. It's going to be interesting. So only 5 units for 1,000 points. And sadly, I don't have any Fulminators, unfortunately. Which would be nice if I did. I'm sure I will get some eventually, because it seems like they're never going out of fashion. And I do really like the Dracothian Guard models, so I could quite happily get 2 more of those and paint them up, build them as Fulminators. I think they're going to stay the hotness for quite a while, and even if they don't, I'm not too averse to putting in a unit that's just cool but not that competitive. I also hear that in the new season the Retributors are going to have a place as well, which is nice because I've always liked those from first edition. I've got a unit of 5, so should be fun times ahead. So this was a really fun tournament, lots of really good players there. The top tables were dominated by Lumineth, I should point out. So I'm going to look at the final standings actually. So out of 42 players, I finished 25th, which is reasonable. 2 wins, 2 losses and 1 draw. You can't get much more average than that, so that's fine by me. And let's have a look. So the winner of the tournament was Sylvaneth, but in the top 10, let's see, it goes Sylvaneth, Lumineth, Lumineth, Beasts of Chaos, Lumineth, 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 Maggotkin, Gloomspite Gits, Soulblight Gravelords. So half the top 10 was Lumineth. And the word on the street is that people consider them to be quite overpowered at the moment. And when I come up against them, I feel like I have 0% chance of winning against Lumineth if they play properly. If they play with just that castle formation with Teclis in the middle, I don't understand what I could physically do under any circumstances to beat them. So, yeah, if anyone knows a way to counter the Lumineth list of doom, then let me know. But it seems like some of the other top players don't even know how to beat that, so I don't know what chance I've got. I don't know whether they would be able to put out a list that works that way at 1,000 points, so I'll see if any of them are at the event this Wednesday. But there are certain lists that only work at those higher levels because you need a certain numbers of tools. I don't know whether you'd be able to fit enough in the list. How many points is Teclis? He's ridiculously expensive, isn't he? Let's have a look. Look at someone's list. And let's have a look at the Lumineth list here. So obviously I'd click the one that doesn't have Teclis in it immediately. Let's try this one. Okay, Teclis, 700 points. Yeah, so if you take Teclis at 1,000 points, you're barely getting anything else. So surely you can't protect him in a 1,000 point event. So surely he's not going to be there. Surely. I was tempted to try and make a list with a Stardrake. I was tempted to make a list with Bastion, because my thinking was that Bastion is going to be a real nightmare for people to deal with in 1,000 points. They might not have that much stuff that can actually handle him. But on the other hand, he's one model and he's slow. So there's a chance that I'll just be losing a third of my army just sitting out in the middle of nowhere for the whole game. It's very possible for that to happen. And I also think that with Bastion, if I wanted to give him a bit more mobility, with like a Lord Relictor for instance, then that's suddenly half my army on 2 heroes, which I think is a bit excessive. So I'd rather have the units that I've chosen. I think it looks decent on paper. I've never actually tried it out. Relevant Prime says, are you picking the 6-inch pile-in mount trait for your Celestant? Maybe you can make a sneaky, crazy techless sniper. Well, I was looking at that, but I decided that the retreat and charge was going to be better. Whether that turns out to be true remains to be seen. We shall see, but that's the one I've gone for at the moment. I'm still open to being persuaded otherwise on that, but at the moment I've got him down with the retreat and charge mount trait. But the 6-inch pile-in one was tempting me. But being able to auto-succeed with the charge after dropping down sounds like a lot of fun. Hit something, if it's not dead, then if I've got a double turn, retreating, then charging in again when he hits harder, when he's charging. Sounds like fun. Let's see. Tempestas are underrated. Are they now? Well, I don't have any, so I can't vouch for that. He survives countercharge, retreat and charge seems very nice. Yes. So I also, let me just check on my list here for the upcoming event. So I've also given him the command trait Heroic Stature as well, so he gets an extra wound. So that'll make him a bit more survivable as well. So I think that puts the Lord Celestant on Dracoth up to 8 wounds. With 10-inch move, 3-up save. Lots of attacks because the claws and fangs of the Dracoth are quite tasty as well. Relevant Prime says, auto charge 12, then sliding around enemy models with 6-inch pile-in, very hard to screen against. That is definitely true. But I think it's up against some very stiff competition in that retreat and charge. So I think because I'm choosing a weapon that's going to do extra on the charge, I've actually emailed the organiser to find out whether they'll let me use the... because it's the Vandus Hammerhand model, but I've put a shield on it. So if they'll let me use the hammer as a glaive, then I'm going to use it as that. Because his hammer does have a really big spike on the end, so it's not that much of a stretch. And even if they try to insist that I use it as one of the 2 hammers, because it's simpler, you still have to have a conversation with the opponent before the game about this guy's weapon anyway, because you have to explain which of the 2 hammers it is. So it's not adding an extra layer of complication by saying, actually, it's the spear. Because it does have a big spike there, and you already have to have that conversation anyway, because he has 2 hammer options. So hopefully that'll be allowed. If they insist that I have to use one of the hammers, then I could either use the Lightning Hammer or the Tempestos Hammer. I think the Lightning Hammer is the one that does mortal wounds on 6s, and the Tempestos Hammer has random damage, and you get a random number of extra attacks on the charge. And it has slightly less rend, but it's got a better 2 wound roll. So, yeah, there's pluses and minuses and all that, but I think the glaive, with the other items and stuff I've chosen, I think the glaive would be the best one if I'm allowed to use it. So, looking forward to that. And I think it's about time to wrap this video up. How long have we been going now? Not far off 2 hours. I think that's pretty concise, actually, for a 5-game tournament like that, with some fairly complicated games in there. And anything else to note? So what else is coming up? After that tournament on Wednesday, next weekend, there's the Kings of War Masters, which I'm taking my Night Stalkers to, and I'm actually putting the finishing touches to the last model for that list at the moment. I just put varnish on it earlier before I did this live stream, and I just need to work on a couple of things to put on the base next, so that's definitely going to be ready in time. Might actually be able to completely finish it tomorrow and put some pictures up. If anyone wants a spoiler, it's a 3rd Shadow Hulk for the army, which is also going to serve as my 3rd Mega Gargant in my new Sons of Beermat army, because I've got some big round bases with the square slots to put my Kings of War Shadow Hulks into. So that's going to be fun. This might be my favourite Shadow Hulk yet, which is saying a lot because I really like the other 2, but this one is very cool, and I think people will enjoy it when they see it, hopefully tomorrow. And then it's Vanquishers on the painting table after that. In terms of events, there's also there's another 2-day Age of Sigmar event right at the end of this month. Then there's a Dead Zone event in February. And there's also, I think there's a Kings of War event later in February as well. So there's lots of stuff coming up. I could pretty much be going to Age of Sigmar events every week if I had the funds, because there's so many of them. And being right in the heart of Nottingham, it's very convenient to get to lots of them. So it's just financially, really. Because these events generally aren't cheap. So the only reason I can afford to go to them at all is because they're so close, so there's no travel cost or accommodation costs. So let's wrap this one up then. Don't think I'll have time to go through all these lovely pictures backwards again. Got a question. Is Lord Celestin on Dracoth a Galatian champion? No, he is not, but we're not using the new rules yet. So the new rules are only coming in with the new General's Handbook. So this one is at Warhammer World, by the way, this tournament on Wednesday. And they only use rules that were out more than a week before the tournament. So the new handbook isn't out yet, so they're not using it. But as soon as that is out, I'm going to grab one. But no, he would not count as a Galatian champion in the new rules. So it might be the last chance to use him for a while, because I might want to use nothing but generic foot heroes. So we shall see. Okay, let's get that thumbnail up again. Thanks to everyone for tuning in, by the way. And yeah, but I think it's because he's mounted, though, that makes him not a Galatian champion. I think that's his reason. So I think it's you have to have less than 9 wounds, not be unique, and not have a mount. I think those are the only restrictions. So things like the Knight Azeros definitely qualify, and they're going to be new and exciting for people that haven't used them very much. Okay, don't forget to check out all the links and whatnot in the description. Don't forget to like the video if you haven't already for some weird reason. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to join the Andy and Rem Discord server. Maybe even the Facebook group. You can follow me on Twitter. All this stuff is linked in the description. There's a link to... in fact, there's a code at the bottom of the description as well if you want to get a free resin chicken miniature when you make an order with Bad Squiddo Games. And don't forget to check out the Patreon as well if you're thinking of pledging to keep this channel afloat, to act as a beacon of light during these dark and turbulent times, to provide some hobby illumination, to relieve the hobby gloom that may have been settling, that has now been lifted by the glory of our Lord Sigmar. Okay, thanks for watching, everybody. And all that remains to be said is, good night out there, whatever you are.